mean, he's a teacher teaching the class right now.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. I'm David McManus, and me, Leidy, and Ashley are the original Hispanic students. Come in.
Ms. McManus, I have a new student for you. Her name's Leidy White. And she is right here for next week.
Okay.
I will leave it over to you now.
All right. Leidy, if you will, please sit down. And if I give you this worksheet, just go ahead and start filling it out. Okay? Oh my word, she's not going to understand what I'm saying. I'm going to have to work twice as hard with her. She's not going to learn. It's a waste of my time. Definitely busy with her.
Okay. Our presentation is Hispanic students. And then you run away. Regional differences.
That skit we will go back to a little bit later. So that's kind of our introduction, kind of keep you pondering as we go through this. There are positives that come with a group of Hispanic students that we're going to go over some of them. A positive that comes with Hispanic students in your classroom, they learn a second language. Most Hispanic students' first language is Spanish, and they learn English in school. For example, Pedro's parents are from El Salvador. They only speak Spanish. And at home, his parents, that's all they speak. So what he has been exposed to at school is different from what he is exposed to at home. So all that he's learning at school is not backed up at home. So it's harder for him to learn it. However, he will become bilingual, which will help him in the future.
Learning English in early childhood. Learning and exploring language, English or Spanish, at an early age is better to learn. Many young Hispanic students can learn English at an early age because it is a critical learning time in a child's life. Introducing a new language to an adult is more challenging. Vanessa, who is 4 years old, and Veronica, who is 7, have moved into the country from Mexico. Vanessa has picked up on English much faster than Veronica. Veronica is having more of a difficult time because she already knows the Spanish language. Vanessa is younger, so learning English is still in her critical learning period. In other words, the earlier the better. For example, in my situation, my older brother and I caught a harder time learning the language than my younger sister and my younger brother. This right here, introducing a new language to an adult, is more of a challenge. My mom has been here for almost 30 years, and she is still at maybe 50% of the language. She can understand it, but she can't speak half of it.
The exposure of culture. Hispanic students are more exposed to a different culture. The culture is different regardless of the birthplace of the students, America or if they're from a different country. In the classroom, these students get exposed to a new culture from what they are normally exposed to at home. During the middle of the school year, Andy moved to Dublin, Georgia from Los Angeles, California. The school that he went to was primarily Hispanic. When he started at a local elementary school, he noticed that the Hispanic student population was much less than where he came from. This is definitely a plus for being Hispanic and coming to an English environment, because not only do you get to carry on your ways of how you would do it, since seeing that you're Spanish, but you get to do it as Americans would do it. And you also, whenever it says the student population was much less from where he came from, that means he's going to be interacting with more than just Hispanics. He's going to be interacting with African Americans, Caucasians. He's just going to be able to produce more than if he was just with Hispanics, because they would do it pretty much the same way, even though there's much diversity in Spanish culture.
Presenting diversity. This is a positive. They bring diversity into the classroom. Their peers are exposed to a different person by their differences from the other students. This prevents the classroom from being one particular diversity. like in Andy's case, he was exposed to a different culture than what he was used to. He came from a primarily Hispanic school and into a school where he was different from everyone. It was also new to the students in the class by having this new student of different diversity and exposing them to that person, and it was different for them. It lets them see that there are other people out there. When you live in a really small rural town, I guess you could say Dublin, but I mean, it depends on the location. But when new students come into the classroom, many students don't leave this area and they don't know what's out there. So this, when a Hispanic student comes in the classroom, the students that have not been cultured as others can see their culture and learn from it, and it will help them in the future.
Expands knowledge. Hispanic students can spread their culture and knowledge to other people, including their teachers and fellow students. These students can even present their language to other students. Mrs. Ford has a Hispanic student named Juan in her first grade class. He is bilingual and has taught her a lot about his culture. He has even taught the class how to count to 10 in Spanish. Especially in small towns, if you are given a Hispanic student into your classroom and you know nothing about that culture, you can learn from that student just as well as he's learning from you. And you can take that knowledge and use it in the future, maybe if you were to have another Hispanic student in that classroom.
Negatives of Hispanic students. Unfortunately, communication is a big part of, it's a big negative if you're Hispanic and you don't know any English, because if you move to a place that is mainly English, I mean, there's only certain things that you really can do in the working force and pretty much communicate with anybody that's not Hispanic. Unfortunately, there can be a lack of communication between the Hispanic student and a teacher or peer if there is no understanding of the English language. The teacher may not be able to get through to the student, or other students may not understand the student if there's no English background. Lindsay she enters kindergarten at 5 years old with no prior exposure to education. Her parents speak Spanish at home, and that is the only language that she has ever known. Her teacher, Miss Jones, has trouble talking to the student or getting her to follow directions. Also, when she sends home notes, Lindsay's parents cannot read the note. That's a big negative, because if the student is way behind and it's struggling to not only learn the language, but like interact with kids and teachers around them to make it better for them and more comfortable for them. If the teacher sends home a note and the parents can't read English, then they have no idea what's going on in the classroom, which means they have no idea what's going on with their child at school.
It's important also to, as teachers, to try to bridge that gap as the best that you can, and try to help that child, because it's not their fault. Okay, there's a hindrance to learning English. That is a negative. Hispanic students can have trouble learning it because many of the students only hear Spanish at home. Because there's no English background in many of the Hispanic students' homes, that English is just harder to get through to them. So teachers have a hard time teaching these students because it's not reiterated at home. And we're not saying, oh, it's just Hispanic students and just Hispanic students. It's not that. It could be that a parent works all the time with a Caucasian student, an Asian student, an African American student, whatever. But if they're hearing English at home, it does help a little bit, even though they may not be getting help with the homework. But with a Spanish student, Spanish-speaking student, they're not even getting spoken to in English. So that's twice as hard, regardless of if they have time. And for example, Beatrice's mom is a local doctor in the town. Her mom only speaks Spanish. Beatrice is in the 2nd grade and is struggling with English and reading. Her teacher has to take time out of her recess to work with her on this subject. She is a hindrance to learning the English language due to the fact that her mother does not speak English at home. And that culture is different. So, it's just a little bit harder for her to get.
Critical period for learning English. If a Hispanic child does not learn English at an early age, they may struggle with English for the rest of their life. Younger students can pick the English language up faster than older students trying to learn English, and this could benefit them in the future. Like with Ron and Vanessa, it is crucial for students to learn English at an early age, or it becomes harder for students to learn. Veronica has had a tougher time than Vanessa learning English. You can have a 3-year-old running around speaking English and Spanish like it's nothing. I mean, they can go from one language to the other. They can also include both languages in one sentence because they're being exposed to both languages. Now you can have an adult who has been here for 30 years like my mother, and she is still struggling to speak it, much less write and read.
Falling behind. Hispanic students can fall behind the classroom. This can occur because they do not understand the language that the teacher is using, or they may not have the same preparation for the school as their peers. Their parents may not have taught them any English or other tasks that they should know by their school age years. As teachers talk about topics and Hispanic students do not understand, this could cause them to fall behind in their classes. It's like if a teacher is like updating them on when tests and when papers are due and when quizzes are due. If the student doesn't understand, then I mean there's never going to be any preparation or any study time for that student to get for the upcoming events. Joe falls behind in his 3rd grade class because he does not understand some of the words and terms that the teacher uses. He speaks English, but his first language is Spanish. Joe falls behind in a class because he does not know certain terms that many of the other students have heard. And if you've been brought up speaking English all your life, then you're going to know more terms than a kid that's been speaking Spanish and then comes into the language of English. It's just like if I ask an English student what's another word for talk, he would say communicate. But if you ask a Spanish student, then he might not know another word except for like talk or interact or something like a smaller word of less knowledge.
Yeah, like more than basic.
Yeah, more of the basic stuff, and it won't have a variety of like vocabulary and understanding of concepts.
There can be a lack of participation in classroom activities and discussions. You know, if a teacher is not patient with these students, I mean, a student can easily give up because they feel as though the teacher does not care, and their desire to learn is just not even there. They cannot participate because they're not understood, or they do not understand what they're trying to like be directed to do, the instructions. For example, like Ms. Caldwell noticed that little Brenda had lacked participation in her 2nd grade class ever since the beginning of the school year. She didn't really understand why, considering the girl was really sweet, she didn't misbehave. But what the teacher didn't know though was that Brenda could not speak very much English. She knew enough to communicate with the teacher, just not that in-depth background that she needed. And she cannot understand some of the things that the teacher was saying, and so Brenda basically just gave up. She didn't really see a point in continuing. So it's very important as teachers for us to involve them in our lessons and try to know your students so that they don't fall behind and can't participate.
Enrique Gomez and Evelyn Hernandez have 7 children, with an 8th on the way. All of them studying in the United States, but the older ones have had problems in school.
Tuvieron muchos problemas en el kinder, en el primer año, y aún ahorita tienen problemas con desarrollo de lectura y de matemáticas.
The Gomez family is not alone here. This is a very common problem with Hispanic families.
De cada 10 hispanos que entran a la primaria, solamente uno va a salir con una educación superior.
Recent studies by the National Center for Education Statistics reveal a wide education gap between Hispanic and white children. This gap has remained constant for the past 20 years.
Cuando un niño latino entra a kinder, tiene más o menos entre 3 y 6 meses de rezago comparado con un niño blanco. Y esas diferencias se van acentuando y se va expandiendo la brecha.
One of the causes of this achievement gap is the lack of access for Hispanics to quality preschools.
El 70% de los niños blancos asisten a la educación preescolar. Menos de la mitad de los niños latinos están matriculados en la educación preescolar.
Evelyn highlights the positive effects her youngest daughter experienced from attending one of these programs.
La niña se puede expresar como si yo estuviera hablando con una persona de 7, 8 años. y ella tiene solamente 5 años.
The teachers also believe that the education gap between Latinos and whites starts at home. Parents are their children's first teachers, but the rigors of modern life prevent many Latino families from encouraging their children to read.
No existe una cultura en el hogar para leerle a los niños desde muy temprana edad.
Studies show that a child's vocabulary can be improved by reading to them at a young age. And even if parents cannot read, they are advised to sit beside them with a book and tell them a story.
Nosotros de padres, nosotros tenemos que estar más influenciados en lo académico con ellos y enfocarnos más en nuestros niños porque son los futuros.
The research shows that getting involved with our children's education as early as possible is crucial if we want them to achieve professional success down the road. From Los Angeles, California, Julia Sáenz, Univision.
Like you see there, their culture is different, like what he was saying about there's no, it's not normal to read to a child at a young age, you know, like many of our parents would read us a story before bed, or their rigorous lifestyle, they don't have the time to work with their children, or even they don't have preschool programs, or they don't have the access to them, which causes them to fall behind.
Like she said that most of the children's teachers begin with their parents. That's not the case for everybody. I mean, not every child goes home to parents who are willing to or able to help them with their work. I mean, I know parents who have kids at school and they can't even read their own language, much less English. So they don't get that help from home. So it's, you know, it's up to the teacher to be willing to go beyond and help that child.
All right. First of all, what can teachers do to address the negative portrayals of Hispanic students? They can take extra time to help them and keep them involved in the classroom and try to keep them on track. They can acquire a master's with a focus on ESOL, which is English for speakers of other languages, which can help those students develop English vocabularies faster and just help them to succeed, really. Teachers really need to have patience, which, you know, teaching is a job that requires much patience. But we need to try to help these students in what they lack and don't give up on these students. We need to learn from the students so that in case they do receive another Hispanic child in their classroom, that you can take what you learned from your first child and get better as the years go on. We need to make sure they feel welcome regardless of their differences and try our best to communicate with them. I mean, one of my teachers in high school had a little student in her pre-K class, and she would take him to our Spanish teacher to try to communicate with the child because he's 4 years old in the pre-K program and would cry every day. But she did what she could in order to communicate with him. And we need to teach the basics. The younger they are, the quicker they learn, and we have to remember that all kids can learn. And make sure to involve the student, even though that even more than other students, really, if they seriously do not understand what's going on, especially if it's going to help them learn the language.
The perceptions of, and we all have perceptions, you know, it's not just towards Hispanic groups, but towards anybody, really. The first perception you get when you see somebody that's not, you know, that's from a different country is, do they know how to speak English? Most of them don't, but that's not always the case. Their legality, you see Mexican people, and most people automatically assume that they're illegally here in the United States. Their economic status, most people believe that, you know, all Mexicans are of low income. Their work ethics. I'm in an interracial marriage, and when I first met my husband, we talked about stuff like this. He said that when he saw a Mexican, he automatically thought that Mexicans, you know, rake pine straw and cut grass and, you know, whatnot. his perception, that was his perception of Mexicans, that, you know, that they either did that or they drove nice vehicles, that they automatically sold drugs. That was just his perception of, you know, of the Hispanic race. And the learning ability of a child, you know, you see a child who's Hispanic and you automatically think they don't speak English. Maybe 5 times out of 10, they do, you know, half the kids nowadays do speak English around here that I've noticed anyway. And also you have to learn with their learning ability, even if the child does not know how to speak English, you have to always remember that all kids can learn.
All right, the portrayals, handicapping the child from learning. If you don't do, like, at home, if the parents don't do extra stuff for the kids, it's more likely that they're still going to be behind throughout the years. Teachers need to be able to find a way to interact with those students to make them better, make them more alert in class, make them more, like, distinctive in their answers where they know what they're talking about, they're not just questioning things. Because it's not bad to ask questions, but, I mean, if you don't even know what you're asking, there's no point in, you know, asking questions. Low parental involvement. You gotta have help at home, even if it's not at home. If the mom or dad needs to come up there to make the kid more comfortable for the learning situation, if it helps the student, I don't think there should be a problem with that. To an extent, they can't just stay at the school all day, but if it's to help them get going and, like, get started throughout the day to help them learn better, I don't ever see a problem with that. Low success expectation. A lot of teachers, like in our skit earlier, whenever the student sat down, teachers, he said out loud, or the consultant said that there's no reason to try for the student if she doesn't even understand, do the worksheet, or if she doesn't understand, come sit down, please. Hey, what is your name? If they don't understand that whenever they first walk in, then there's going to be a negative output from the teacher to the student. But you always need to have a high expectation rate for your students, no matter if they're African American, white, Spanish, Asian. It doesn't matter what they are. You should always have the equal expectation rate. And if you are seeing people struggle, then you need to have even a higher expectation rate for them to pass, just because they've been struggling and they worked so hard.
All right, and as we do this skit, think about what we did to begin with and see what was different from what we did at the beginning, and see what was the correct way and what was the wrong way, okay?
Come in.
Mr. McManus, you have a new student.
Okay.
She just moved here from Mexico. Her name is Leidy White.
Hey, lady.
Hi. Okay, so I'll leave her to you, and I will go back to.
Okay. If you would please sit down. If you would please start on the worksheet that I've left on the desk. This student may be a challenge, but I need to talk with her and see what she knows. I have to prepare myself for this student and learn so that I can communicate with her. I need to post translations of some items and do all that I can to help her.
Oh, thank you, sir. I was like,
And help her that I can do to help her learn the English language. I may want to include her more in classroom activities so that she can pick up on the language from her peers. Hey, how are you? I'm Mr. McManus, and welcome to our class. What high school did you come from? All right, and then now we're going to.
what was different was that Leidy did not know what David was saying. Their communication was off. She kind of figured out, okay, I need to go sit in my seat. I guess everyone else is sitting down, but when he was asking those questions, all she could do was nod. And you think about it, when, like, if we were to travel to another country and somebody say, do you want tea, water? You don't know what they say, so you're like, okay. You know, so you have to seriously like maybe be patient with them and work with them. So like he said about he has to prepare himself and work with the student instead of what he did at the beginning versus now. This is the way we should approach students that are like this. Okay. We have a little activity.
When you're passing it out, I was going to say the biggest thing is his attitude was different. The first thing was, oh, she's going to be a dummy, and I'm going to go with her first cheek. And then the second time, so he's going to have to figure out how to communicate with her, but at least he approached it with a better attitude.
Katie, you remember having this in what's his name class? What's her name? You remember, yeah. I don't remember his name. I think I was the group that presented it. She
Okay, so, most of us, I'm assuming, took Spanish in high school, some took French, but, some of us took Spanish, and these are just basic words that we would use in a classroom. So they're not off-the-wall words that we wouldn't use. These are just maybe everyday words that we would use in Spanish or in English, and then they're translated to Spanish.
And those aren't matched up, by the way.
Now, imagine you went to a country and all you saw was this. And all everybody spoke was this. How would you feel?
Lost.
And that's what your students would go through. If you are teaching one day and your student walks in and this side is all they know, and you have no form of, like, say you have that clock up there, and you have clock and then the word. You would have both words up there, so they know, okay, that's a clock, or even the English translation, so they look at it and go, okay, that's a clock. You know, that would help them. But if you walk into a classroom and those are all you see, you're going to be lost. You're not going to know what's going on. So it's our job as teachers to take that into consideration. Are all of you done? Yes.
I have a question. Are we going to get these graded?
That's what started about that.
Well, I guess we could tell them the answer.
Yeah.
So number 1 would be B, 2 is A, 3 is E, 4 is I, 5 is C, 6 is
J.
Where's it at? I can't see it. 6 is J, 7 is G, 8 is H, 9 is D, 10 is F.
Hey, I'm going to
Yeah, I tried when you're welcome. Yeah, but before, yeah, I got that. You got them all? Okay. Okay, you're Dora, but yeah.